most traditional CISOs were really doing a version of compliance. They were securing against crime, not war.
Welcome to the Cyber Insurance News and Information Podcast. I'm your host, Martin Hinton, and today we're going to be talking about crypto and the adversarial cyber environment, while also serving as a fast-paced testbed for security incentives, loss prevention, and eventually cyber catastrophe insurance. It's a big space, and to help us discuss that today is Mitchell Amador, the CEO of Immunefi. Mitchell, before we dive into that big topic today, thanks so much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about your career and how you got to this space.
Sure. Well, I got here accidentally. I had no particular enthusiasm to become a security professional, and the technical side of the business was never my forte. But I found in the course of building lots of different things in early crypto and prior that I kept stumbling into the most severe security and threat modeling problems that we had in the industry. I had to deal with SIM swap attacks where someone takes over your phone, breaks into your iCloud, tries to steal all of your data. It's like identity theft at mass scale. Insider attacks, social engineering attacks, attempted hacks of company treasury and funds, attempted kidnappings and stalkings of all sorts, IP thefts, technology thefts, corporate espionage, and everything in between. So in the course of building a lot of things, I was pulled into this world of security. And I saw all the problems that ultimately brought me to the conclusion that, and this was in 2019, 2020, that if we didn't transform how we were doing security in crypto, we were not going to survive. Okay, that we would hit a kind of vulnerability apocalypse that would delegitimize our whole industry. And it was that insight and a wish to prevent that and to safeguard my industry that I loved. I got involved for ideological reasons, that I entered the space and that I built Immunefi, which is one of the larger protectors of the industry today.
So tell me about Immunefi. We chatted before today, so I know a little bit, but I don't get paid to know things. I get paid to have you explain them. So tell me what Immunefi does.
So Immunefi is the biggest security platform protecting on-chain protocols, platforms, and blockchains in the world today. And specifically, we occupy the bug bounty niche and beyond, but we occupy almost all of the major protocols bug bounties. If you look at major protocols by TVL or size, almost all of them are going to be Immunefi customers, and they're going to host their crowdsourced security defense mechanisms with us. In practice, what that means is we've aggregated the largest white hat community spanning the entirety of the crypto security scene and also the traditional web security scene. And we tell these guys, hey, look, we've got all these amazing projects. They need protection. They need support. And you, and only you, are on the frontier of security that can go and help provide these things. You can find out how to crack their infrastructure and disclose the vulnerabilities that they don't know exist before they could be exploited. And we operate as the central clearinghouse for all these, what would be traditionally known as 0 days, to go between almost every major project in the industry and the global white hat security community.
So you help people find problems and fix them with regard to security in the crypto space.
That's right. We help people find the holes in their bank vaults they didn't know they have, and unfortunately with software, there are always holes.
Indeed. So when we were planning this and chatting about this conversation beforehand, we talked about, I think the phrase was Web3 is a bit of a dark forest. And I wonder if in practical terms, you might explain what you think people mean or what that means to people.
Sure. So I will bet that a number of your listeners are actually going to know exactly what that refers to, because this quote, of course, comes from the famous Chinese science fiction novel, The Three-Body Problem. And in The Three-Body Problem, they describe this challenge. Why is it not that the aliens have reached out? Why do we see no evidence of alien life and activity and civilization when we, earthly humans, are broadcasting an infinite amount of very specific and particular and sensible radiation out into the cosmos constantly? Why don't we see it in return? And they get to this conclusion, this terrifying conclusion, that the galaxy, the universe, is a dark forest. And what that means is that there are these predators that are constantly prowling the environment the entire time. And so the advantageous position in this environment is just to be strictly silent and to be unnoticed, to be unseen, to be invisible, because the moment you reveal yourself, a predator will pounce upon you. They must. It is game theoretically optimal for them to take you out. And the connection to crypto is we are the same way, but with vulnerabilities. At any particular moment, there are dozens of illegal criminal groups, many of which could be operating at vast scale, think billions of dollars, okay? It's like really, really large scale, that are scanning every major contract on chain, that are looking at every new project and every new deployment, hoping and waiting for a single gap, a single break in the armor that they can exploit to steal all the money in those contracts. Because in crypto, a hack is not just a hack. It's not a breach of PII or personally identifiable information that's going out. Nobody cares about that here. The hack allows you to steal real money. The biggest heists in the history of mankind all happen here with our bearer assets. And so every sophisticated, technical, criminal organization in the world realizes there's no better place to be a thief than crypto. And at the peak of these, by the way, just to color and contextualize this dark forest analogy, the most famous group of thieves in crypto today is North Korea, specifically the North Korean army. Okay, this is the environment we're operating in. They're just one player.
You touch on, I'll throw a link in the show notes. There have been great articles about their stunningly organized and global efforts to steal from in this situation, and then more broadly as well. That all suggests that it's shifted to a much more industrialized or organized kind of reality. Like that, there is a persistent threat to the crypto environment from well-funded, well-organized nation state, in the case of North Korea, backed actors. Is that a fair characterization?
100%. And not just North Korea. North Korea is just the most famous. The largest Iranian exchange went down in the opening days of their war, being hacked by an Israeli cyber attack group. And we know that some of these other groups in Ukraine and Russia have been throwing cyber bombs, so to speak, at each other for years and years and years now. So North Korea is just the most public, but we're in an environment where the norm or the default, the typical threat model for a builder in our industry is that there are nation state actors and they are out to get you and to rob you.
I mean, and this is a 24-hour day, every moment of time threat, right? That there's a constant scanning of the system. That presents a constant threat, right? Obviously. What is the response to that? What are people who are in this space need to be thinking about if maybe they're not quite aware? And I suspect most of them are, but crypto is one of those things that a lot of people who aren't involved hear about and they pretend they understand, or they maybe are bold and admit they don't. But what about that idea? What does normal even look like when you're facing this kind of threat?
Sure. This is where the dark forest analogy breaks down, by the way, because at least in Three Body Problem, in the dark forest, you had a solution. You stay silent. You do not emit or radiate any signal. You stay invisible in order to stay alive. But in crypto, we built the whole system so it's transparent by default and everybody can see what everybody else does. So, no such option. No, we don't have good solutions to that part. And so the only solution that we have is really to go after the holy grail of cybersecurity, which is we need objectively secure systems. We need as close to perfect security, perfect defense, unhackability as you can get, as the technology can allow, as physics will allow. And this is actually what all of on-chain security is about. And this is what we do. We create objectively secure systems.
So pausing there for a sec, right? So just for those of the audience who aren't on the inside, if you're outside crypto, what's the clearest way to understand the stakes here? Why it matters? For people who don't really understand this space, why does it matter?
Sure, great question. It matters for two reasons. Number one is this technology has proven so impactful and transformational, the blockchain that is, that it is inevitably going to underpin global financial infrastructure for the next several decades. Okay, we are in process of replacing financial infrastructure across the world. The tech works great, lowest costs, all these benefits that will be brought to society is being brought to society. It's happening. But the flip side of that is when an attacker can compromise these systems, they can do incredible damage. The biggest hack last year was for $1.6 billion. $1.6 billion in less than 15 seconds. Okay? Scary. Two hacks earlier in March were for $300 million each, cash. Okay? This is a high stakes game. This is, the GDP of entire cities across the world, right? Tens and hundreds of thousands of people laboring to create good lives just stolen like that. Okay, it has immense impact on people's lives.
Yeah,
That's why we
I
must
mean,
win.
I think that's why. I mean, one of the ideas that's important to keep in mind is that if something bad happens to your neighbor or within the ecosystem of your economy, even if you're not involved in that economy, it's a bit like a storm hitting California, and you have a situation where you may not think living in Ohio it matters, but then you realize you're paying twice as much for avocados. That sort of domino effect is the reason it matters broadly across, even people who aren't really involved.
Exactly so. And this is especially salient when you think of what crypto is and what it offers, which is a superior, fairer, more transparent, more inclusive financial markets. Okay, which is exciting, but financial markets, if they're going to be efficient, they're going to have leverage, and so they're prone to contagion. And so these events can get really out of hand. Okay, they can cause much more damage. We've been able to prevent those scenarios to date. We've done a very good job. The industry has some really great people who believe in the mission and who support it, and they've put up, $1 billion in some cases to make sure that creditors at some of these institutions that are harmed stay whole. But that's the kind of stakes that we're playing with here. And eventually, it's going to touch the whole of society. So we need to create these systems and make them safe right now before we see trillions more in assets flow on chain.
That attitude is one that it's a befitting example because I think broadly with the digital economy that we've embraced since, basically the World Wide Web came into fruition in the 90s, is one where we've raced forward, maybe built on less than ideal tech stacks, right? That the problems of yesterday don't get addressed, and you wind up exacerbating the failure to get it right from the beginning, or at least have a principle in place from the beginning. Is that a juxtaposition to the way you see this all being developed within the crypto world? The idea is we got to get this right from the start. For it to be new and reliable, and the world to be comfortable with this change. We also need to find ourselves in a situation where the money goes into a, if you will, vault or a bank that is actually secure, that people can feel safe about. Is that too simple a way to think about it?
Yes and no. I mean, look, we've been building in this at scale now, Martin, for over a decade. Okay? At scale, I'm talking millions and millions of users, no longer hobbyist projects, but serious money and people dedicating their entire careers to this type of activity. So it's been a long road. We had our period there where we were YOLOing and, we were influenced by the move fast and break things philosophy. But all of crypto has converged on, kind of move as fast as you can and break absolutely nothing as security philosophy. Every single investor will enforce that standard and expectation on their portfolio companies. Every single institution will expect it. Every single exchange will demand it. So we've gone in this new direction where, yes, that is our point of view. And it's still early days, right? So you could say that we've committed to that. Obviously, being around in the industry a long time, I'm a little more nuanced. I see all the things we tried and failed at as well. So I can't say we really decided it from the beginning. It's more like we learned the hard way at small scale. And now we've committed as kind of more mature adults that this is going to be the foundation of our industry. And it's working.
So shifting back to bug bounty, I wonder if you could, in a plain English way, explain or define what a bug bounty is.
Sure. So a bug bounty is real simple. It's a big prize that you put up for someone in case they can find a vulnerability in your system. Okay, and that's a very general statement because it's a very general tool. The bug bounty itself, the bug bounty program we call it, is really just a legal contract. It's a prize contract. It's a contest. Or saying, look, I'm looking for this type of thing. I've got my bank vault, if you will. And my bank vault is not just made up of a building, or it could be, it's also made up of code. It's also made up of servers. It's also made up of infrastructure. It's made up of websites, and so on and so forth. And I say to you, Martin, you being the cunning, clever, brilliant, hopefully white hat hacker that you are, if you can find a vulnerability that meets these requirements, that lets you do these bad things to me, to my customers, to my data, then I'm going to pay you a prize. I'm going to pay you it, and I'm going to pay it according to this much money that I specified in advance in the contract, the bug bounty program. So this is what a bug bounty is. Now, even though the description I gave here is simple, as you can imagine, it can get very, very technical, right? Because we're talking about technical systems, and your typical bug bounty program is going to specify at least half a dozen, if not 24 different impacts, or how do we say this? Deliverables, so to speak, that they're looking for. Like, you need to be able to hack this system so that it achieves this thing specifically, or this thing, or this thing, and that determines how much money you get. But at a high level, and how it works, it's a contest.
So the wisdom behind paying hackers to report flaws, that's because you're tapping into the perspective and the way they see things as something to break into. Is it you're taking advantage of whether it's learned or maybe internal natural instinct on the part of them? Is that the wise part? Find a potential adversary and convert them into an asset.
That's a benefit, Martin, but that is off the mark. That is not why we do this. It is nice. Hackers are brilliant and creative and harebrained people, make no mistake. And it's great to have them on our side. But the real reason that we do that is numbers. It's the sheer force of security power that we can bring to bear in hardening our systems. And I'll give you this example real simple. Imagine we have our own vault that we're protecting, and you've got 2-3 colleagues who do IT and security, and you need to make sure all the system is secure because you got gold there. You got your corporate IP there. You got all the PIF from your business. You got all your customers' records, all the transactions. Maybe you have access to your actual banking infrastructure as well, passwords and the like. There's a lot of valuable stuff there. Now we're going to say on one side, you have 3 guys. They're going to work great. They're going to work hard. I'm sure they're extremely competent, but they're 3 guys. Now, what if I said I could deploy 30,000 guys to stress test your system? Which one do you think is going to result in a more secure system?
The 30,000?
30,000. Not 1,000 times more, because that's not how it works, but definitely 5, 10, 20 times. As much, you start to approach the kind of hypothetical limit of how secure a system of that architecture can be. And the only way we found to do that in cybersecurity is really by deploying more eyes, more people who are using different techniques and who have different points of view and ways of looking at it. And so what a bug bounty really does is it gives you scale. It gives you the kind of scale that you could never build yourself. And let's go back to this North Korean example. So the North Koreans who are doing this, they are not a corporate outfit. They are literally part of the army, the intelligence division of the army. And they're responsible for bringing in revenue, to which they bring at least billions of dollars per year, which of course goes to fund the North Korean military and society and so on and so forth. Now, in the total of their program, I would say there's probably maybe 300 to 1,000 hackers, probably on the lower end of that, okay? And these guys operate one of the largest and most sophisticated and certainly the most feared hacking armies in the world of finance today. Okay, and there's less than 1,000 guys. Immunefi alone has over 90,000 registered hackers. Okay, just us, not including our competitors or all the other players in the industry, just us. We outnumber the biggest threat actor in the world, right? Many, many times over. Okay, many times over. And many of these hackers with us are also corporate entities or companies that have access to some of the most advanced and frontier security technology in the world. The best formal verification solutions, which is like unfuzzing solutions, and these are basically sci-fi technologies that we've burst into reality in the course of crypto that make us able to create secure code. Crypto makes the safest code in the world at this point. It's just us and people working on nuclear and ballistic missile systems. Okay? This is the small group of people who can create objectively secure code in the world today. And we've created tech to make that commercially viable and feasible at massive scale. Now combine all that, these crazy, brilliant minds, plus we outnumber them, right? We outnumber them 100 to 1 easily, probably more like 1,000 to 1 if you pull in the broader Web2 security communities. And you realize, wow, if you can deploy all that talent to secure a system, that is going to be incomparably more valuable. That's going to be the most effective thing you could possibly do to secure your code and to secure your infrastructure. And that's why we use bug bounties, because in a world where you like, where a single failure, where if you get 99.9%, you fail, right? And getting even a fraction of that wrong. In that world, you need this disproportionate army of security experts who are protecting you, and bug bounties and crowdsourced security is the only way to do it. You are always going to be outnumbered, no matter what company you go to, Martin. No matter what project you build, the odds are the North Koreans are going to have more hackers than you. But with the crowdsourced solution, we can give you an army that's infinitely larger than theirs.
I mean, it seems like there's a sort of different pillars of, if you will, breakthrough here. There's the technical, economic, and then you touched on the sort of the cultural part of this. I mean, is the breadth of this that great?
Yes, I would say so. I would say so. And in more ways than I explained, right? Obviously, numerically, we are much more advantaged than the attackers. There's just more brilliant, good people in the world who have more brilliance and expertise than there are attackers. That's the reality. We do have technological breakthroughs. In fact, the very people who are the ones who would want to help society and do this work, we are typically the ones who make the technical breakthroughs as well. Because, the great inventors, the geniuses, they don't tend to be like, the criminal masterminds of society for the most part. They tend to be the tinkerers and the creatives and the kind of like artistic engineering types who just like to build things and want to contribute to society. And then we've created really an excellent culture around this work, even better than traditional web, even better than traditional open source. The crypto security culture is, I think, in my opinion, in my experience, the best security culture in the history of the world. We share everything, okay? We share our data with each other. We share our information. We share our technology and techniques with competitors. It's more like coopetition, almost anywhere else. And we glorify people who protect society. And this has created an environment where it's very easy to get involved. Plus, we have huge incentives. Like, Immunefi pays out, we just paid a $3 million bounty for a single bug 2 months ago. And that's not an uncommon occurrence. That's just something that happens. Some guy can retire for life on that if he wants. He's probably sitting in Indonesia somewhere because he's probably from Indonesia, just relaxing. Okay, cool. Good job, man. Go have some kids.
You touch on something that, I use the word culture in the question that set that answer up. And one of the things that I've become fascinated in this space is the CISO at corporations and the way that they are sort of the new kid and they're pressing for money and they're viewed as a cost center. And I've read a couple of reports that survey them about what works. And it's counterintuitive to certainly corporate culture in the conventional sense, where what they admit confidentially in at least one report I've read is that being able to talk to CISOs at other companies in the same space as them, potential competitors, and share information about what they're seeing and how they're responding to it is invaluable. But the problem is that's counterintuitive to classic C-suite mentality about a competitor's executives. And I wonder whether or not like that's. Do you have any thoughts about that? That the way that you've described this. What did you say? Cooperation, or I forgot. I forget how you put that word.
Coopetition.
Say that one more time.
Coopetition.
Coopetition. Okay. So
That's
explain
right.
coopetition to me and why maybe others could benefit from this, because I want to move into the idea that the way we're talking about this and what you said might suggest that the mentality around security and crypto has solved problems that other industries and other sectors could emulate, copy, absorb parts of, or learn lessons from, however you want to put it. What do you think about that? That idea that there are elements of this, if you will, new thing that could really help existing legacy environment.
Excellent and prophetic inference about where the future of security and the rest of the internet must go. And we will see there are pressures that will force it in this direction. But to your point, yes, that's exactly what we do. So security leaders in crypto are well networked. Almost all of us know almost all of us, right? We go to the same events, we meet in the same groups, we share our information very liberally. And while this might be exotic or strange to traditional C-suite, the reason why we do that is because we all understand we face a much greater threat. And that threat is total annihilation, total destruction of equity, total loss of customer well-being. Okay? It's very frightening. And because of that, we have to take extreme measures. And the best measure is to coordinate our resources amongst each other. Any one CISO, any one security leader can only do so much. But when coordinating with 100 others, we might see a threat that's happening in the Chinese community or in the Indonesian community and be able to route that immediately to the American teams or the European teams, or pass information of a known hacker, straight to Interpol for dealing with, to see if those funds can be frozen and returned to the people. In fact, we've been a part of many such cases where by coordinating, we've been able to stop thefts. Most recently, North Korea stole $300 million in one of these cases. And in one such event, one of these DAOs managed to freeze 90 million of those dollars, okay? Because they could coordinate in this intelligent, pro-social way, where people had the same expectations, first and foremost, that we should be protecting the community, and this is a primary and critical and important thing, okay? As a result, this creates the valuation and the prioritization of sharing information. Now, I said this is a very prophetic inference because there's a huge change that's happening in security right now that we already went through in crypto, that the rest of the internet, and by extension, the rest of the global economy, is about to experience and find out. And that's the nature of the severity of your threat model. Your average American company doesn't really depend against nation-state actors for the most part, right? Maybe the largest ones do, but like your typical, you got an Ohio beer company, it's not on their radar that anything could happen. They may not even have passwords on their Wi-Fi systems, right? It's probably all open access, like hotels that you see almost everywhere in the world are open access systems, easy to enter and exfiltrate data. So, and that's most people, most of the time by default. Only the largest institutions get to that realization. But in crypto, we've been living in that world all the time. We are in the dark forest where these North Korean monsters, right, are looking about for any moment of weakness so that they can quite literally steal all of our money in a flash. And the reason why I mention that the rest of the world is soon going to be changing there is because the advance of frontier models have made it easier than ever to create effective cyber attacking teams and resources at mass scale. If I look back 3 or 4 years ago, we had a handful of these groups across the world. We even had names for them called APTs, or Advanced Persistent Threats, because hacking groups were so rare. But now, any reasonably sophisticated hacker, reasonably competent and expert hacker, can create their own, operated mostly by themselves if they can use these advanced LLM agents effectively, which have proven very effective at cyber offense. And so the same problem that we had, right, where we had a disproportionate number of APTs looking at us hacking groups, finding these things, well, now all of the hacking groups and all of the small-time hackers in the world can do the same things that it once took a 300-person army from North Korea to be able to do. Everybody can have a nation-state cyber attacking army now. And the world's just beginning to realize that. And they're going to discover, the whole internet is discovering slowly, but it'll escalate soon, that most traditional CISOs are really doing a version of compliance, not security. Or rather, the definition of security changed. They were securing against crime, not war. But in crypto, we secure against war. I give this analogy to my colleagues. I say, we don't do cybersecurity, we do cyber defense. Because we're in a war that never ends. And our colleagues are about to join us in this new war, whether they like it or not.
I mean, you touch on I think to pause on that point. The reality of this environment, the cyber crime, the cyber threat, whatever it is, there's a dynamic nature to it that is very much like the chaos you get when people describe what combat and warfare are like, where
Yes,
all your
yes.
plans and all your preparation are only so useful. They are useful. Don't make any mistakes about that. But the inability to know what the future holds is a paramount thing to keep in mind. Is that what we're talking about here? And that you need to be nimble and thoughtful and adaptable in order to meet the threats that you can't even imagine because they're beyond your imagination because they're into the future.
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that what you said is true, but no in the sense is that's not the core thing. That is a tangential or kind of like secondary point. The central point is that the economics of cybersecurity were once are based around the economics of how much it costs a human hacker to do things. Okay, and what it takes to do for a human hacker to do things at scale. And that whole status quo is officially out the window. Okay, the economics have changed dramatically. And I'll give you an example. A few years ago, there were probably 500,000 sophisticated security professionals in the world who could do most of the interesting vulnerability or zero-day research that could impact large enterprises or the economy at scale. That's a very small number of people. Most of those people are going to be working for large companies or governments. And so in the end, the pool of effective cyber criminals is quite small. It was very rare. But now, with the advent of LLM techniques, that number has effectively exploded. Imagine that number going at least 10x. You can imagine instead of going 500,000, there are 5 million. Instead of there being, possibly, say, 500 to 2,000 hacking groups in the world that could cause material harm, now that number is instantaneously more like 5,000 to 25,000. Okay? This explosion of capabilities, of offensive capabilities, it's like the world woke up and gave everybody the equivalent of these, how do I say it? These missile systems and these drone systems that have revolutionized warfare in Ukraine and the Middle East in a terrifying way. What if we were to take the equivalent of that in the cyber domain and just give it to everybody? Because that's what we did,
Yeah,
right? That's what these new models have done.
you touch on a principle that is famous for the U.S. Army Special Forces, specifically the Green Berets, and the phrase they use is force multiplication. And the idea is that you might take a 13-man Green Beret A team, the famous A team, and send them to a country, and those 13 men can train 5,000 people to become soldiers in 6-10 weeks, and that then creates an army well beyond the 13 fighting capacity of the 13, and it is absolutely a function of, and this is the positive and negative of AI, right? You can use it to do for good or for bad, and the way it's landed in the field of bad is something that is people are just getting their heads around. I mean, do you think the vast majority of people comprehend just the scale that's achievable now because it exists there and it's largely, if you will, virtually free to use?
They have no idea. But what's worse is that the vast majority of CISOs have no idea, right?
Yeah,
Everything, their budget, their infrastructure is all based on the last war. Their whole system is a Maginot line, for a conflict that it's just not going to be behaving under the same rules and conditions.
there's a we before we started we chatted about history, and there's prior to World War II there was a very famous American general named Billy Mitchell, and he was an advocate for air power while everyone wanted to build battleships, and he said no, 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 the next war is going to involve airplanes that take off of ships, and they're going to be able to sink ships really easily. You need airplanes, you need airplanes. Lo and behold, he turned out to be very right. And I think that's a phenomenon, right? We get invested in what we've bought and the tools we have rather than the tools we might wind up needing. And in addition to that, and the problem is that the CISO who sticks his head up and says, too loudly, that's an existential threat to their existence and their job
Yes.
security to become that human dynamic is a weird part in all this, in this crypto technical, world of digital, the human element of, good leadership, clarity of narrative, the ability to explain a problem and why the new solution you need to, if you will, build should be brought on board at some expense. Is that part of this that is sort of counterintuitive to what many people might think when they hear about crypto or they think of crypto?
In what sense? Like the
Well,
the, the kind of
well,
security framing, or
so, well, I think that, we hear a lot with AI that jobs are going to be replaced, that people are, what are people going to do, and how do people play a role in this? But adapting to this reality and absorbing it into humanity is going to require human beings to adapt and
yes.
be primary in the experience, right? To lead the experience. And I guess I'm curious what you think about that. Whether you think that's accurate, or whether you think that the whole notion of, the phrase you hear is agentic AI, things that do things, you give them a task and they go off and they do it on their own. And that's that, just like an employee. Well, employees make mistakes. LLMs are only based on us. So they're going to repeat all the things that we did at scale. I mean, the joke I've been making is that, we use the phrase hallucinations, and I go, you mean mistakes? Like that's what we used to call them when people made them, but obviously in the new thing has to have a new language and a new buzz. I guess I'm curious what you think about that broadly, that idea of, the importance of people in all this, back to bug bounty and the human being the one that finds the problem.
Well, it's complicated. It's not an easy, and now we must all be prophets, Martin. So you put me in a difficult spot where I have to Cassandra this if I'm going to give something of value. But look, crypto is a little different. In my view, most of the adoption will happen in a way that nobody notices, and the more crypto can do that, the more likely it is to succeed and provide value for society. And the reason for that is that it's a back end system. It's a back office system. Like the people don't want to know how the accounting is done for them to get paid. They want to get paid and move on with their lives, of which they're eminently correct. Debits and credits is not for everybody. And, crypto is complicated back end shared and distributed databases. Okay. And the systems that do it will mostly be like that, the ones that touch people's lives. A few of them are going to be interesting, impactful, and front-facing. You know that I made the first social media application in crypto almost a decade ago now that got to millions of users. There will be things like that are forward-facing. There will be things like net new assets like Bitcoin that are forward-facing and interesting. But that's a small number of things. If there was never any Bitcoin, for example, any ever kind of publicly investable or accessible crypto markets, this whole technology set could still provide incredible value for civilization just by replacing the traditional database models that we see across finance today. Okay? So it's not true that humans need to be at the forefront. What's true is finding great and compelling use cases and being able to demonstrate the efficaciousness of superior and the safety of these distributed systems. That's what's key. And if you can do that at large enough scale, then adoption will take care of itself, as basically superior technology sets do. The caveat with that, of course, is when we look at the history of the advancement of technology, the best technology does not always win, right? Germany discovered last year that it needed nuclear after all. Go figure. They don't have much at the moment. It's a problem. So people go down different paths. I personally think we went down a different path by not investing in hovercrafts and not investing in more kind of air Zeppelin technologies and inflatable balloons. Could have been a really interesting world, but instead we just skipped all that. We went to jet airplanes, and I'm not sure that was the path. I mean, where are our sky yachts? It didn't work out for us. It was a big loss. Okay. So, things go that way. And in that sense, you do need people to champion. And crypto is really at the fore of that with its huge kind of consumer marketing angle and its big focus on all these new financial applications that protect people's wealth. In an environment that's becoming increasingly dangerous, like the value proposition of crypto today is becoming more and more obvious to everybody as all these currencies effectively go bananas. So that's me hedging my bets and saying, like, okay, there's a human element of this, but like, crypto can still win, blockchain can still win and become extremely relevant to your life without you ever hearing, without there being any famous figure, any proselytizing from on high. On the other hand, the more interesting, superior world, right, and the non-dystopian world, I think, is the world where we do have people who can speak to the benefits, who can make this a human-led movement, who can really inject their theology or their values, their worldview into the technology, which is where crypto started and what made it most interesting for me personally. Okay. That is going to be the best possible world for this tech. And in that sense, we are still doing that, and it is still human driven, even though it's got a bunch of finance.
So bringing it back to cyber insurance and the role that plays, where could, I suppose is the better way to put it, where could all this fit into the cyber insurance landscape?
Sure. Okay. So there's a few different ways to think about that. The most important one is this, Martin. How do you feel about the effectiveness or the reliability of cyber insurance as a market today? The largest new insurance market in the world. Incredibly valuable. But what's the current state of it? What do you think?
Well, I mean, the pricing is the word soft has been lingering in that market for quite a while now. I think that you know it its issues now are compounded by the broader pressure on insurance generally, particularly in America, and it's a complex risk. And there's this argument about if you enter AI into the conversation, does that fall into cyber insurance, or should it be its own separate reality, given the complexity of that new additional problem, which we've touched on? So I think it's a it's probably fair to say it's a toddler and it's still learning to use a knife and a fork and pull its pants on. Is probably where it is in the broader scheme of a lifespan. But what do you think about that?
That's a very wise and gracious answer, I would say. I would, to be fair, like the central challenge of insurance, of course, is risk management. And the big challenge with software is that this stuff is really risky and finicky. And when we designed software in the beginning, we didn't design it to be riskless or safe. That is not what we intended to do. We designed it to get to the answer that we wanted, usually fastest or cheapest. And we made a hell of a lot of trade-offs in that process. The classic example is the internet. The internet was never designed to be a secure system, and it's not a secure system. It has all of these foibles that make it exposable and make it brutalizable, that make it an environment for theft, that make it effectively a live fire zone, okay, for people across the world. We didn't have to be designed this way. There were alternatives, but that is how it was designed. And the global internet works in this way, and that's what makes it a haven for crime and other such problems. Now, we have slowly figured out on the internet how to mitigate these solutions one band-aid at a time until we ended up with this kind of like interesting monstrosity with all these different like casts and bandages and like ointments all applied on wherever the little wounds are. And in crypto, we ended up having to go down a different path because we didn't have time, we didn't have space, we didn't have decades to figure out how this was all going to work. We had a few years. And as a result, we built security and learning the lessons from the internet, of course, knowing that we're dealing with money. We built security and as much, risk reduction as we possibly could into the ideologies and the values of our systems. There's no blockchain in the world that's not designed to be secure, first and foremost. Okay? There's no blockchain in the world that is not designed to minimize customer and user risk, first and foremost. And many of the systems have quite complex measures in order to do that. As a result, we are rapidly converging on a world where we can effectively price the cyber risk of on-chain systems. We're not quite there yet. But I'll give you an example. Over the last 6 years or so, we had the explosion of DeFi, which went from effectively zero into a market that's worth hundreds of billions, a financial market that is larger than the vast majority of countries in the world today. Okay? Now, in that market, we were seeing loss rates of between 2 and 4% of assets per year, which is really high, really, really painful. But it was the frontier. and there were incredible gains to be made. Most of those losses were from logic errors. If I look at the losses from code errors and logic errors this year, we're sitting at 0.6%. Sorry, this was last year. This year, the numbers so far are even lower. It was 0.6%. Okay. And those numbers are falling fast. There's a world that we can get to within, I believe, by 2030. Okay. Where effective losses due to logic and code errors are going to be sub 10 basis points of annual resources per year. And in that world, we're approaching parity, if not superior security, risk reduction relative to traditional financial systems and traditional financial economy for various reasons. And who knows, we could get it even lower from there, 5 basis points, right? Maybe 1 basis point, depending on the scale. Why? Because we have objectively secure systems, because we have objectively secure code. Okay? This does not eliminate financial risk, of course. Like, you do not solve balance sheet risk with great code. That's not how that works, right? You don't solve, systems engineering problems and kind of risk tolerance and managing your debts and your liabilities accordingly with super secure code. That doesn't help for that either. You don't solve black swan events or political problems with super secure code. It doesn't work for that. But you do solve the code problem. And the code problem is the most terrifying of them all. Because if you can't have secure code, you introduce downstream risk into every other system, no matter how things are going. Okay? So we're on the cusp of a new kind of insurance in the blockchain markets, where we can reliably predict and price smart contract insurance. And when we can do this, this is going to be one of the key unlocks for moving the larger traditional financial markets on chain. We're not there yet, but we're going to be there. Within the next few years, we'll have achieved it because we created objectively secure code. And by the way, that is something we will be able to export to the rest of the internet. So it's not going to stop here. We will share our benefits with everybody.
I think of myself right now. My history, Bud, is I'm thinking of the first steam engine and how simple and basic it was, and how all these people came to it with improvements that led to it powering the industrial age, and that we're in a similar moment in the way you're explaining it. That this is a technology that not only can you exist within and be secure and have risk more quantifiable so that it can be underwritten more. It's something that can be then it can propagate across the existing parts of the world's tech stack, if you will. Is that what we're talking about?
100%. 100%. Not just as an infrastructure layer, but as a tool stack. So, for example, the world is going to inherit our threat model, and it'll make the internet and society a safer place when people learn that cyber defense is how you protect a company, not cybersecurity. No longer mall cop security, but like, understand the North Koreans are out to get you. And they'll take our tool stack too. We've created the most advanced technologies for proving that code is safe and secure and making them cheap, making them economically accessible in a way that they never were before. Okay? And we're going to give those to the whole of the internet, and we'll be like, hey, look, do you guys want cheap, objectively secure code? Here are the tools to do that. Ultra low cost. We did all the R&D. We did all the technological breakthroughs. We did all the scientific hard work. You can just have this and have it for free. Okay. And if you want, you can create secure JavaScript. You can create secure Rust for whatever it is that you're using. And this is going to bring everybody else's danger, everybody else's hacks, everybody else's exploitability, everybody else's cyber risk way, way, way down. We're just going to give it to them all. It's going to be great. We're not done, but it's going to be great.
So we've touched on AI. I wonder, when we look at the next phase of things, one of the big things people talk about is quantum computing and its impact on, standard encryption as it exists now. So what about that new thing, if you will, the thing that everyone talks about coming in, depending on who you talk to, a few years or maybe longer? What do you see in that landscape, and how's it going to impact the space?
That is a very exciting question. The answer is what you suspect, which is it's going to impact us in either this, exciting, brave new world sense, or it's going to be terrifying and destroy everything. And let's look at the latter part first, how it's going to destroy everything, because that's what people want to hear, right? It's an insurance podcast. We got the good stuff. If we can't find a solution to quantum cryptography that works for blockchains, then the entire premise of blockchain as a safe, trustworthy, shared, distributed database is destroyed. And then, because whoever has effectively the ability to use their quantum computers in order to break this encryption can effectively steal everybody else's money, sometimes in a way without them even knowing. And so that's a game over for blockchains if it can't be solved. Now, I don't worry about that too much, because just like it's game over for us, it's also game over for every bank and financial institution in the world. Because if we can't crack quantum cryptography for our needs, they're sure as hell not going to do it. They're way less competent than we are. They're way less savvy about basically the frontier of computer science and security than we are. It's night and day difference. So, they're going to be fucked. Sorry, screwed. The militaries around the world are going to be screwed for the most part. Most militaries are not capable of handling this kind of cryptography problem on their own. So imagine everybody's communications being broken overnight. Most governments are going to become effectively transparent to whoever this mysterious quantum computer operator is going to be. It's like really a nightmare scenario, because all of what we depend on for electronic communication becomes breachable, really. Now, on the other hand, we expect, and we are building as an industry to solve that problem. We are working on new quantum cryptography solutions that we can upgrade existing blockchains with, such that our systems prove invulnerable to that type of threat. But there's a caveat. And the caveat is nobody really knows what will be invulnerable or not. It's very difficult to prove that your quantum secure algorithm, your quantum secure cryptography is really quantum secure. And so the rest of the world's in this position too, mind you, but we're all just going to have to YOLO this together in some form. And we're taking from the best of what the quantum community has, and we're giving them the best of what we're discovering. Because just like we see, right, we're defending against a bigger enemy. The bigger enemy of quantum computation breaking existing cryptographic encryption schemes, like that is a real boogeyman. That's much more damaging to society than any rogue state like North Korea is. No, much worse.
I find myself thinking about all the hand wringing over Y2K, and that sounds like a children's picnic to the scale of this potential problem.
Yes,
Is that fair?
100%, 100%.
Well, in that context, what should businesses be doing? If you're hearing this and you're a CEO or on the board of a company, what should be the next question you ask, given the fact that whether you like it or not, this is coming, and it's going to impact you and all the things you rely on, quite frankly, as you put it.
Well, this will tickle you, Martin. You'll understand this right away, as a man of history. For most people, you can afford to do nothing, because the stakes are so high that the people with the most resources must do a whole lot to ensure their own survival. And so there's this kind of tragedy of the commons where the vast majority of society is just going to freeload off of the few institutions that make the investment, and it's going to, okay, sure, why not? Thanks guys, you do all the hard work. And it doesn't really make sense to take the bet against yourself, because you don't have the resources to make a material difference for the most part. And so you're kind of forced to make a bet that you're going to figure it out, perfectly. And then, since you're already making that bet, why worry about it? It's kind of like nuclear war versus not nuclear war. For the most part, you just bet that it's not going to happen. You continue on with your life.
Yeah.
Having said that, if you're a CISO at a major company or government or institution, you do actually have a chance to play a privileged role in this story. You really do. Because frankly, this industry needs money, and it needs publicity, and it needs culture, right? People need to develop the solutions. A lot of that is going on in militaries behind closed doors, which is not great for us and industry and in broader civil society, because we don't get to share in those benefits, and they will surely keep them from us. So we need more development on the public side of things. Then we need to popularize that. A lot of really cool stuff is being built, okay, in the quantum computing realm. But so much of it gets locked up in these large organizations We need to be popularizing what can get shared, but the large organizations and the small ones, and the scientists and the academia all around the world. Popularize that so people can learn the lessons as fast as possible. And then we need to create a culture of sharing. Okay? And this is where CISOs all around the world can get involved and participate by just encouraging others to take a look and by sharing these things actively. Because this is a threat that we all share. And that culture may end up being the key towards saving a lot of society from harm from this, because maybe somebody does get a quantum attack capability, but if someone else gets quantum defense, they have effective quantum encryption algorithms, they can be bullied. They have to be convinced to share that, okay? And if we have a culture and an expectation in society that we're all going to look after each other, we dramatically increase the chances that that party will be incentivized to share that technology with the rest of us, and thereby safeguard the global society, the global market, the global civil society. So these are three things, and CISOs are going to have to play a role in this, because believe me, I think the militaries are developing lots of stuff, but I will bet top dollar that the private industry will outproduce and out research um, all of the governments in the world on this subject. That's probably where the solution is going to come from. So if we set this culture between us as security specialists, that we all have a stake in defending society, and we're going to share this information just because, and we're going to encourage it just because, even if we're not in a personal position to do about it, we'll at least publicize the good actors and reward them for doing good for society. I think that will be impactful. I think that will make a difference. Yeah.
Well said. So we're coming up on about an hour. We obviously didn't get to everything that we may have had in our planned conversation. Is there anything we didn't touch on that you think we should mention, or anything that you'd like to say any more about?
Yeah, I mean, probably the thing that I would say is we are entering a new world in so many ways, right? Crypto is transforming finance. It's going to be unrecognizable in 10 or 15 years. It's really completely different. AI is transforming knowledge work in just absurd and crazy ways. The kind of global chessboard of geopolitics is being rearranged before our eyes, with strange and sometimes very comical combinations of events going on. We live in this fascinating time of change. Okay, the longevity industry is blowing up. I don't know about you. I have a friend going out to California and meet a bunch of them right now. They're convinced they're on the verge of at least 50 extra years for most people. I hope they're right. That would be great. Everything is changing, and we all have a kind of part to play in this story. One of these key parts, you guys are working on the insurance side. This is something that we're going to need. We're going to have to stabilize this system. We're like a kid going through puberty once again, and that's great while it lasts. But at some point, we're going to have to calm down and figure out how we're going to live with all of these things instead of allowing our civilization to sink into the dust. So, you guys have a role to play in this story. People like me are trying to innovate on security, give you guys all the tools that we possibly can. We're telling you that we're moving into a world where we can create objectively secure code, objectively secure systems, and that it's really going to work. You'll be able to do magic with this. And I hope somehow into the future, all this stuff proves useful to you guys in helping create the future in your own way, because you'll have a role to play too.
All right. One last question. 5 years from now, what will seem obvious that most people still miss today?
There's so many things.
Pick one.
Oh, the one, it'll be a spicy one. That use of technology by individuals needs to be heavily controlled for health and well-being.
Well put. Well put. Mitchell, I have nothing else. Do you have anything else you want to say, or any other last thoughts?
No, it was my pleasure. Martin, always a pleasure to chat. I learned some new things in the course of being interviewed, which is always delightful. It was a great time, and if I can prove helpful in the future, you just let me know. I'll come back on and support, okay?
That'd be great, Mitchell. Thanks so much. Everyone else, you've been listening to Mitchell Amador, the CEO of Immunefi. We mentioned a few things, and there'll be some links in the show notes wherever you might be listening to or watching this, so you can find those resources there. Likewise, if you've got a question or a comment, a thought, please share it. You can leave it in the comments, and I'll get you an answer or pass it on to Mitchell if I can. But Mitchell, again, thanks so much for the time today. Everyone else, thank you so much for watching. This is the Cyber Insurance News and Information Podcast. I'm your host, Martin Hinton. Enjoy the rest of your day.